people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Hey yo, first and foremost, shout out to Lamont Roach and Tank. That was a great fight. I enjoyed it. But yo, I'm making this video because for the whole build-up, y'all were killing me over my victory over Lamont, saying that he wasn't worthy of the Tank fight. But at the end of the day, I don't care what y'all say, I got that W. That's all I'm saying.
That is former WBO super featherweight champion and friend to the channel, Jamal Herring. We were actually in the Corps together.
You weren't in the Marines.
Well, I wasn't, but he was, and he reacted to yesterday's fight between Gervonta Davis and Lamont Roach, a common opponent between them, and he just wants his just due. The credit that people weren't giving him so many years ago when he beat that same Lamont Roach. That's what it's all about.
How many times do you see Gervonta Davis and Gervonta Davis's fans poo-pooing over everybody at or around these weights, pretending that they're not fighting anybody, they're not fighting anybody good?
How many times?
How many times have you seen them poo-poo on Shakur Stevenson's resume? Shakur Stevenson, who beat Jamal Herring, and Jamal Herring, who beat Lamont Roach. He didn't draw with him.
There was no controversy after the fight.
No breaks in the action and no breaks in between to get the hair gel out of his eye.
Jamal beat him, and he beat him handily.
He beat him years ago.
And nobody was shouting it from the rooftops when he did it. So that all these years later, when Gervonta Davis cannot do to Lamont Roach what Jamal Herring did to Lamont Roach, we're supposed to make excuses?
No.
Or we're supposed to pretend
No.
that this is a different Lamont Roach? That's a different guy?
Are there two of them?
No, there aren't. There's only one Lamont Roach, and Jamal Herring beat him. Gervonta Davis didn't. He doesn't split into two separate fighters because you need to make excuses for Gervonta.
By that reckoning, I guess we shouldn't give Floyd Mayweather credit for beating Canelo. He was a different guy.
That's what you guys are doing with Lamont Roach. You're pretending something changed, when the only thing that was supposed to was your perception of Gervonta.
Should have been a wake-up call.
But for some people, it still isn't. They want to hold to what they believe about Gervonta because they can't believe their eyes. I saw sports analyst Demetria Obalor say, people saying because Herring beat Roach and Shakur beat Herring, Shakur would beat Tank. Slow your roll. Frazier beat Ali in Fight of the Century. Then Foreman destroyed Frazier, but couldn't beat Ali. A plus B doesn't always equal C, but C does stand for casuals who don't understand style.
She's not completely wrong. Triangle theories don't work.
She's right about that, but there is no triangle between Shakur Stevenson and Gervonta Davis. There's a triangle between Shakur Stevenson and Lamont Roach. Demetria continued, Shakur can't beat Tank. Not enough power there.
Lamont Roach is not a power puncher.
Roach has power and a chin.
Shakur Stevenson has more knockouts than Lamont Roach. What are you talking about?
That's why this was a great matchup for Tank. Shakur is going to be technically great, but when Tank lands, it's done.
I disagree.
Because it's actually harder, much harder to land a punch, a clean punch on Shakur, than it is to land one on Lamont. So if you can't land with authority on Lamont, you're not going to with Shakur.
He's even harder to hit.
I don't want to waste any more of your time or mine talking about a fight between Shakur Stevenson and Gervonta Davis because I'm convinced it's never going to happen. Stevenson versus Roach, that might. Because after the fight, Gervonta Davis said they're not going into an immediate rematch with Lamont, leaving Lamont free to take on Shakur. If Turkey makes it worth his while, makes him an offer he can't refuse, he may be the next American fighter that boxes on one of Turkey's shows.
Shakur beats him.
The same way Jamal Herring did years ago, in better fashion.
Shakur beats him.
He's better in the pocket than Lamont Roach, or have you not been paying attention that his last two fights, he's been fighting mid-range to inside, not long and loose on the outside like he did with Edwin De Los Santos. He's been fighting within striking distance for his last two fights, and he's still hard to land a punch on. He's still hard to hit.
He's got more ways of fighting this fight because he's a little taller than Lamont and a bit longer, so he can out-hustle him on the inside and outpoint him from the outside.
Don't misunderstand me. Lamont Roach is a good fighter, but Shakur is better than he is in every department.
He's a good super featherweight.
I don't want to poo-poo all over this kid, but if it were Lamont Roach versus Shakur Stevenson or Lamont Roach versus Keyshawn Davis, Shakur outpoints him easily and Keyshawn knocks him out.
This is what I mean when I say that Lamont didn't change yesterday, and the only thing that should have was your perception of Gervonta, because this is the kind of guy he's supposed to plow through, and he didn't.
So what you want to do now is scale everybody down to try and make it make sense, so that Gervonta can still be who you thought he was while not being able to beat this guy.
Stop it.
Contrary to Demetria's evaluation of a Stevenson versus Lamont Roach fight, Lamont Roach is not a power puncher, so he's not going to give him the respect he gave Nicotila or Edwin De Los Santos. I anticipate he's going to do to him what he did to Artem Haratunian.
Because this guy's not a knockout merchant.
Boxing fans often exaggerate what they see. They think Shakur Stevenson fights every fight from the outside. He didn't fight Artem Haratunian on the outside or Josh Padley.
Or can say so.
Well, he's a pure boxer. He is definitely a pure boxer. Safety first. But unless you're a big puncher, he ain't gonna stick and move and stay on the outside. He might actually sit in the pocket with Lamont.
Don't elevate Lamont Roach to new heights because Gervonta couldn't handle him. That's what you're doing.
Here's the thing, though. Lamont Roach was always a solid fighter, solid fundamental, and I'm going to reiterate what I said before. Solid fundamental fighter. Nothing that wows you, though. No crazy speed, no crazy power. Just a solid fundamental fighter who's been well-schooled, well-taught, and well-balanced. And that's who he was tonight. His sense of positioning allowed him to catch and shoot in some spots. He had a mentally strong game plan in terms of he was trying to hold ground a lot and sort of back up Gervonta Davis. Davis still... when you really think about it, he ends up fighting a Lamont Roach, who's a 130-pound champion, been a perennial contender for about 10 years, finally won a world title. You bring him up in weight with all the lightweights, tough lightweights that are out there. You go outside the weight class to defend the title and get a smaller guy, which is something that he'd done already before with Garcia a couple of years back, the guy he fought before he fought Ryan Garcia. I don't know, man. I can't keep reiterating how disappointing Gervonta Davis has been as far as the resume is concerned. If this is about as manufactured a star as you can make, and anybody who is going to defend that is really got to get their groupie lenses checked, because I've never seen a guy with this many pay-per-view headliners have not a single Hall of Famer on his resume.
Manufactured is right. Manufactured is the word I often use when talking about Gervonta Davis, because that's what he is. A manufactured pay-per-view star.
Boxing insider Rick Glacier reacted to yesterday's fight by saying, "You can now add Tank Davis to the list of fighters that are very overrated. Will be very interesting to see if Tank takes the rematch with Lamont. Let's see what Tank is really made of." And we saw what Tank is really about last night. He was actually outlanded by Lamont Roach. 112 punches to 103. Outlanded in terms of jabs, he landed 25 to Gervonta Davis's 10, and outlanded in punches overall.
He landed more punches on Gervonta than Gervonta landed on him.
More statistics. 75% of app users to the Boxing News app scored the fight to Lamont Roach. That's an overwhelming number. 75%? That's more than half. That means most people that voted that Lamont Roach won.
Wow.
He suddenly becomes a credible scalp for a Shakur Stevenson. And what would be a fight of some size and some scale, let's see if Shakur Stevenson can do a better job on this guy than Gervonta.
I'm 100% sure he can.
There's levels. And I understand that's one of many cliches you often hear in association with the sport of boxing from people who don't even know what they're saying.
I can almost guarantee you Shakur Stevenson wins that fight.
Because it really isn't that Lamont Roach all of a sudden became a special fighter or a different fighter. It's that you found out Gervonta's not what you think he is.
You won't accept it.
So now we enter into the phase where it's going to take for you to see somebody else handle this guy the way Gervonta Davis didn't.
So that when he does, what you will then say is triangle theories don't work.
So that if Shakur Stevenson goes in there and does a better job on Lamont than Gervonta, that's what you're going to say.
Then let them fight.
And therein lies a dilemma. Gervonta Davis doesn't want to fight Shakur Stevenson. He's made that very clear. He would rather bring up smaller and lesser-known fighters than Shakur, and fight them. And let's not pretend that there was a whole lot of people that knew who Lamont Roach was before Gervonta decided to fight him. And let's not pretend that there was a whole lot of people saying Lamont stands a legitimate chance of testing Gervonta Davis. There weren't.
He was a 20-1 underdog going in.
The money line's not going to look like that because of how many people think Lamont stands a chance. By all rights, this was another guy that Gervonta was supposed to beat easy, so that when he doesn't, the world around him doesn't change. It's your perception of him that should.
And you don't want it to.
After getting a rare glimpse at what could happen to Gervonta Davis if he strays too far outside of that PBC bubble.
This is how he looked with a Lamont Roach. How would he look with a Shakur Stevenson?
Veteran commentator Christina Poncher said, "There are plenty of things that are discretionary in boxing, but taking a voluntary knee and subsequently getting a count is not one of those things. Not to mention walking over to your corner in the middle of the round for a towel?"
Paulie Malignaggi, who I just mentioned, said, "That was a knockdown. Roach wins by a point."
Another analyst, and Ariel Helwani, said, "Knee touches the ground, it's ruled a knockdown. A rule as old as time. Plus, you can't ask your corner to wipe your face mid-round. Post-fight appeals rarely win, but Roach has to appeal this. If that's correctly ruled a knockdown, Roach wins a split decision."
He's right.
The additional point from the 10-8 round puts it over the top for Lamont Roach, who most people are convinced did enough to win yesterday. Gervonta's version of it: "They took the fight from me and made it a draw because I did that bullshit knee. But I landed the most punches in the fight.
Not what the stats say.
He didn't even hit me with a punch when I took a knee. I get it though. I shouldn't have done that, but that hair grease was burning my eyes."
You hear this guy? When we talk about Gervonta, we gotta talk about hair grease, braids, leg tattoos, purses.
This is what we got to talk about when we talk about this guy. I understand that this is the talk of the town right now. This is all anybody in the boxing world is thinking about, but I'm over this subject. I really am. And I am over Gervonta Davis.
The desire to see him step up in class and step up in competition, fight his contemporaries, I'm over it.
It's the obligation to talk about today's top boxing news that even brings me back to this subject that I've broached many, many times in the past.
He's a hype job.
You guys are just late to the party. Some of you might just now be realizing that he's not who you think he is, while some of you are holding on to the illusion.
Holding to it.
Watching Gervonta Davis fly too close to the sun on wings of wax and paper, as Icarus once did, ultimately crashing down to the earth. Burning, this will too crash and burn upon you.
You're gonna regret putting him on a pedestal. In men's super middleweight news, Christian Mbilli versus Diego Pacheco, talks in the works, would provide the 168-pound division the 50-50 action it's lacked.
So much of the conversation centered around Canelo Alvarez and whatever he's doing, you tend to forget that this is actually a deep division with many good fights to make.
While it's more than true that super middleweight fight fans have been deprived of the ideal bouts they seek in recent years, others in the division appear committed to testing themselves. The Canadian promoter for WBC and WBA top-ranked contender, Christian Mbilli, says his fighter embraces the opportunity of fellow unbeaten and WBO top-ranked contender Diego Pacheco next. As Plant talks with Pacheco promoter Eddie Hearns' Matchroom proceed, "We want this fight," Mbilli promoter Camille Estefan told Boxing Scene on Thursday. "It seems like Pacheco is willing as well, and it's a matter of getting together with Matchroom to see if we can begin negotiations and whether it's economically viable."
Another battle of the unbeatens.
Christian Mbilli, 28-0 with 23 KOs, is coming off an August UD over former title challenger Sergey Derevyanchenko, and the 23-year-old Pacheco, 23-0 with 18 KOs, scored a hard-fought UD over another veteran in Steven Nelson, January 25th in Vegas. That was just last month. As super middleweight champion, Canelo Alvarez disappointed fans by avoiding unbeaten former champion David Benavidez.
Who wrote this article?
Lance Pugmire. Lance continued last year by fighting Jaime Munguia and Edgar Berlanga, and now has agreed to fight massive underdog and IBF champion William Skull and 4-division champion Terrence Crawford. This year, Mbilli versus Pacheco would strengthen the mandatory contender position of the winner beyond where they already stand. As Stefan said, the venue and date are flexible. Considering Pacheco fought more recently, the fans really want to see this fight, as Stefan said. Both guys are looked upon as the next big thing. Pacheco spoke about his future recently and alluded to bouts including Mbilli and former super middleweight champion Caleb Plant. Also of note is that in a status update for its champions released on Wednesday, the WBC mentioned that a tournament will be structured with the top contenders in the super middleweight division who are available. Nothing is locked in yet, but we're in the works of making some big fights happen, Pacheco said earlier this month. That's what we're in the sport for, trying to get to the top. That's what we're going for. I have good faith we're making the right decisions for my career, and I think they are, because the way they're going about it with Diego, they're building a buzz organically by having him fight the fights,
as opposed to simply attaching his name to a more well-known fighter and then name-dropping him every time there's a camera rolling. That hack brand of promotion.
The way you build a fighter is by letting the fighter fight. That's how you get it done, and that's what they've been doing with Diego. That succession of fights, from unbeaten Steven Nelson to unbeaten Christian Mbilli.
I love it.
And what will be another battle of the unbeatens. They're rolling the dice with this one, but for us to get there, they have to make the numbers work. The numbers have to be good enough for Diego just as well as they have to be for Christian.
Have to be good enough.
You have to pay to play. But with so many of Matchroom's fighters already tied to Turkey LL Sheik's shows, whether it's Dimitri Bivol or Callum Smith, Shakur Stevenson, these are fighters that Matchroom didn't have to pay out of their own budget, out of their own pocket, because Turkey paid them. So theoretically, the money should be there.
The money you didn't have to pay out to them, you can pay to make this fight.
I like Diego to win it, but it's not easy. Christian Mbilli is a pressure guy, a mid-range to inside volume puncher. You've got to catch him coming in. You have to meet him at the door, because if he slips past the jab and gets on the inside, a taller, longer fighter like Diego could get flustered there. So you have to keep a bit of space between you and him.
That's not just pumping out that jab. You've got to move. Don't hold your feet.
For Diego, he has to maintain distance, whereas for Christian, he has to close it. He has to close the distance, get inside on Diego, and rough him up.
I think Diego is the bigger puncher of the two, but he's also the fighter that needs more room to work.
Being the taller, longer fighter is only an advantage if you know how to use it.
Can't let these little guys go crowding you.
The money punch for Diego would have to be the uppercut. Christian Mbilli comes in at a slight crouch, bending at the waist and knees, and he's already shorter than Diego.
You time that uppercut, he's right there for it. You can split the guard and do a lot of damage with one punch.
And that's the money punch for Diego in this fight. The money punch for Christian is the looping backhand over the top.
Slipping Diego's jab, angling off to the side, then bringing over the backhand to catch him while he's open.
Over the top.
But I give Diego the edge to win it. That is, I give him the edge to win by way of knockout. I think he can keep space, keep distance, and catch Christian coming in. Catch him with something hard.
Let's see if they make this fight.